Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 28, Text 35. Translation. When the mind is thus completely freed from all material contamination and detached from material objectives, it is just like the flame of a lamp. At that time, the mind is actually dovetailed with that of the Supreme Lord and is experienced as one with Him because it is freed from the interactive flow of the material qualities. Purport. In the material world, the activities of the mind are acceptance and rejection. As long as the mind is in material consciousness, it must be forcibly trained to accept meditation on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But when one is actually elevated to loving the Supreme Lord, the mind is automatically absorbed in thought of the Lord. In such a position, a yogi has no other thought than to serve the Lord. This dovetailing of the mind with the desires of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is called nirvana, or making the mind one with the Supreme Lord. The best example of nirvana is stated in Bhagavad Gita. In the beginning, the mind of Arjuna deviated from Krishna's. Krishna wanted Arjuna to fight, but Arjuna did not want to. So there was disagreement. But after hearing Bhagavad Gita from the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Arjuna dovetailed his mind with Krishna's desire. This is called oneness. This oneness, however, did not cause Arjuna and Krishna to lose their individualities. The Mayavadi philosophers cannot understand this. They think that oneness necessitates loss of individuality. Actually, however, we find in Bhagavad Gita that individuality is not lost. When the mind is completely purified in love of Godhead, the mind becomes the mind of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The mind at that time does not act separately, nor does it act without inspiration to fulfill the desire of the Lord. The individual liberated soul has no other activity. Pratinivritta guna pravaha. In the conditioned state, the mind is always engaged in activity impelled by the three modes of the material world. But in the transcendental stage, the material modes cannot disturb the mind of the devotee. The devotee has no other concern than to satisfy the desires of the Lord. Is there some way to keep it open? That is the highest stage of perfection, called nirvana or nirvana mukti. At this stage, the mind becomes completely free from material desire. Yatharchi, archi means flame. When a lamp is broken or the oil is finished, we see that the flame of the lamp goes out. But according to scientific understanding, the flame is not extinguished, it is conserved. This is conservation of energy. Similarly, when the mind stops functioning on the material platform, it is conserved in the activities of the Supreme Lord. The Mayavadi philosophers' conception of cessation of the functions of the mind is explained here. Cessation of the mental functions means cessation of activities conducted under the influence of the three modes of material nature. Muktashayam yahi nirvishayam viraktam nirvanam richati mana sahasa yatharchi atmanamatra purusho avayavadanam ekam anvikshate pratinivritta guna pravaha. When the mind is thus completely freed from all material contamination and detached from material objectives, it is just like the flame of a lamp. At that time, the mind is actually dovetailed with that of the Supreme Lord and is experienced as one with Him because it is freed from the interactive flow of the material qualities. So, mind will always act on one platform or another, even within the spiritual form, there is mind. Mind meaning the thinking process. This is not void in the spiritual sky. Mayavadis may think so, but it is not so. There is thought process as well. We find many examples of Krishna considering this or thinking about that. It's like when he was in his pastimes in Vrindavan, and the cowherd boys all marched into the mouth of the Aghasura demon. Krishna stood there and thought for a second. He thought, now what shall I do? Now, of course, such thinking on the part of Krishna does not mean that he was in doubt what to do, but it was actually part of his enjoyment to stand there and think, oh, this Aghasura demon has gone and swallowed all my friends. My goodness. And the Aghasura demon himself was quite pleased to see Krishna in that state, wondering what to do. The Aghasura demon was patiently waiting with his mouth open, thinking, yes, very good. Now he will also walk in. And that's just what Krishna did, unfortunately. For the Aghasura demon, that was the end of him, when Krishna choked him and pushed out his life air. So, Krishna may engage in that thinking process as well, but for him it is not necessary. It is part of his pastimes. His energies act automatically. He's pure knowledge in unlimited quantity. There's no need of contemplation or consideration. And yet, we the living entities who are reflections of the qualities of the Supreme, we also think. And in the spiritual sky there is also thinking, but thinking of Krishna. So, the mind is the agency by which one may also think of Krishna. The mind is the agency by which one may think of Maya. The mind is the agency by which one may think of Krishna. When one is thinking of Krishna, the quality of the mind is different. The quality of the material mind is very low class, and extremely contaminated. It is too much absorbed in the sense gratification desires. Therefore the mind is not purified. And it is very hard for the mind to think of Krishna. The mind has a hard time thinking of Krishna because the mind doesn't want to think of Krishna, because thinking of Krishna does not give it enjoyment. In the conditioned state, the senses are more pleased with ordinary types of sense gratification, born of the material world, and the mind is echoing that as well. And one may not find Krishna to bring him sense gratification. Therefore the mind will reject that. In fact, when Krishna is there, the desires for sense gratification or the acts of sense gratification reduce. Therefore the mind will rebel against that. Sometimes. Sometimes the mind will say, no, I don't want all this surrender. This means that you surrender to Krishna and that you give everything to Krishna. That means nothing much for us. So this is rejected by the mind. But in the advanced state, when the mind is absorbed in thinking of Krishna, the mind is also utilized. But utilized in a way by which the mind becomes the vehicle for carrying the mental image of Krishna. The thought of Krishna's pastimes, reliving those pastimes in the mind by speaking about it. We have seen sometimes in this material world things that happened in the good old days weren't that good while they were happening. But in the mind, years later, they are relived and they are very nice. In the good old days. So the mind becomes a source of reliving activities which took place in the past. And Krishna's pastimes are like that too. The devotee of the Lord relives Krishna's pastimes in his mind, just like the gopis in Vrindavan. We're always thinking about what Krishna did. Even after Krishna left Vrindavan, of course Krishna never takes one step out of Vrindavan, but after Krishna externally seemed to leave Vrindavan, although he was there within their hearts, the Prabhav Prakash expansion within the heart of all the gopis. Although he seemingly externally left, the gopis always had him captured within their hearts by the intense thought and love and separation that they experienced. They were always experiencing intense separation from Krishna. Intense. They were always continuously thinking of him. Thinking of his pastimes. Oh, Krishna used to walk here. Just see, we can still see the footprint of the Lord. And here he used to tend the cows. And here he used to come home. And Mother Yashoda would stand here and call him to take lunch. And we would go and dance together in the forest there. And they would go to these places and they would become mad in ecstasy, simply remembering Krishna. They would remember Krishna, his pastimes, his places, what he said to them. They would remember the sweet words he spoke to them, or the chastisements he spoke to them, or the tricks he played on them. And they would become mad in ecstasy remembering that. Just like when someone you love tells you something, you remember that later on. You remember that always. And if sometimes you have chance to remember that in an opportune moment, that brings one very great happiness. So the gopis were always remembering Krishna like that. Always remembering his form, always remembering his pastimes, always remembering his paraphernalia and his associates and his words. Thinking of his beautiful voice. So we may also engage in such remembrance. We can remember Krishna's words in Bhagavad Gita. We can remember Krishna's pastimes as they are given in Krishna book or 10th canto. We can remember the form of the Lord as we see it in the temple by always viewing Krishna, always seeing Krishna. That image of the Lord becomes embedded within that mind. And that form of the Lord, or the words of the Lord in Bhagavad Gita, the pastimes of the Lord in Vrindavan, they become embedded in the mind. And one remembers these always. And whenever he thinks of Krishna or acts or begins to become a little inspired due to some thing which makes him remember Krishna, he becomes very ecstatic. Just like Prabhupada once mentioned in Bombay, that if the parents see the shoe of the child, although the child may not be there, they become absorbed in love for their child. Oh, here is the shoe of my child. Oh, and my child, where he is now, not wearing his shoe, and thinking about his poor little foot must be getting hurt somewhere. Mundane, perverted reflection of the gopis' concern for Krishna. But the parent remembers because of the child's shoe. So although the shoe is separated from the child, and it is not in the same place, and although the child is somewhere else, but because the shoe is the paraphernalia of the child, the shoe and the child become non-different in the mind of the parent. And the shoe causes the parent to remember the child. So similarly, we can remember Krishna like that when we see Krishna's place, Vrindavan, and in the forests of Vrindavan, see those special places where Krishna used to engage in his pastimes with his loving associates, then immediately we can remember Krishna. It immediately causes us to remember Krishna. or whenever we see something which belonged to the deity or anything connected with Krishna. Tadiyanam and Aradhanam. Aradhanam Sarvesham Vishnu Aradhanam Param. Of all, Lord Shiva says, of all of the different forms of worship of the Lord, or forms of worship in general, the worship of Vishnu. Vishnu Aradhanam Param. Aradhanam Sarvesham. Of all the different forms of worship. Vishnu Aradhanam Param. The worship of Krishna, Vishnu, the Supreme Person, is the highest. Tasmat Pratadam Devi Tadiyanam Aradhanam. However, even higher than that is the worship of those things which are connected with Krishna. Worship of Krishna's paraphernalia or Krishna's plant, Tulsi worship. The worship of Krishna's devotee. We find that Lord Shiva says that is even better. For then we have the opportunity of coming closer to Krishna through the agency of these merciful representatives of the Lord. Bhishma Dev says the devotee actually more merciful than the Lord himself, or Prabhupada says in the purport to Lord Bhishma Dev's instructions. He said that the devotee of the Lord is more merciful than the Lord himself, because the Lord himself may not reveal himself all the time. You have to be qualified. But the devotee of the Lord takes risk upon himself to go out and bring to others Krishna consciousness. Sometimes we forget in our dealings with each other that the devotees are actually merciful. They are actually bringing Krishna consciousness to conditioned souls. And it's a risk. After all, you have to associate with the conditioned souls. And one may become contaminated. There are so many ways in which you can become contaminated. And associating with those who are materialistically contaminated is certainly a method by which one can become contaminated in this material world. So, devotees are actually merciful. Therefore it is stated that they're the ocean of mercy. We find devotees, they are described as being very merciful, titiksha. Very tolerant, very merciful, karunika. Titiksha means devotees tolerant, even though so many things may be there, which may cause him trouble. And in this material world, the whole world is made of trouble. Trouble. Why? Because that is what we deserve. This world is filled with persons who are getting trouble and making trouble. We always make trouble. Always, in this material world, even if everything's fine, we have to make trouble. Because we have to suffer that way, so we're always creating disturbing conditions. And even if we try to not create disturbing conditions, the material energy will do it for us, don't worry. Trouble must be there. This is the problem of the material world. So many problems. That's the problem. So titiksha, all of these appearances and disappearances of happiness and distress. Matcha sparshas tukantya satoshna sukadukada agama paino anicca. Tam titiksha vavad. These appearances and disappearances of happiness and distress within this world are just like the appearance and disappearance of the summer and winter season in due course of time. They come by nature, automatically. Simply the nature in this material world says there must be this appearance and disappearance of happiness and distress. Therefore, what shall you do? Well, the Bhagavatam definitely does not recommend that one creates a huge organization just to relieve oneself from the problems of distress. The Bhagavatam says, make your life simple. Agama payano nitya. Just tolerate. Tamsta tikshava. It's temporary. Temporary anyway. Just tolerate it. What else can you do? When suffering comes, you've got a choice. You can tolerate it, or you can get upset. Now, if you get upset, I think you're blocking off a whole bunch. If you get upset, then it becomes twice as bad. You're already suffering. And then if you get upset, then you just throw more suffering on yourself. So therefore, the Gita says, save yourself some trouble and tolerate it. This is nothing you can do anyway in this material world. Even you try not to get involved in entangling situations. Even you try to be peaceful, forget it. It's not possible. The material nature just finds you out wherever you're hiding. You may try to hide in a hole somewhere deep down under the earth. Something will happen. Your cave will cave in or something. You've got to have trouble. There's no way. Nature will find you out wherever you are. And that material nature will grant you all the miseries that you could ever imagine. Don't feel bad about it. Don't get upset. Don't kick your feet on the ground and stomp and shout. Throw your plate through the window. That just simply increases the problem. One should simply tolerate all of these disturbing conditions. Because after all, you've got no choice. At least the devotee understands that. We've got no choice but to suffer. That's the nature of this world. And if perchance everything goes nice for some time, you should simply see it as a trick of Maya. To make one very attached. So that when Maya then is like a setup, you know? It's like if you tell somebody, everything's fine. Oh, so wonderful, don't worry. Beautiful, fantastic. Then the person's thinking, yes, it's great. And he takes his club and boom! Called a setup. Set you up into a condition where everyone thinks everything's fine, and then boom. Material nature is like that. Material nature makes everybody think it's all fine. And then, bam, hits us with a good slap in the face. This material world is made of suffering conditions. So if it's sometime temporarily very nice, look out. Titikshava, toleration. One must learn to tolerate. Because you've got no choice. That's a good enough reason. Karnika, merciful. One must be merciful to others if he wants to be a sadhu. That is why our devotees go out and distribute these transcendental literatures. Or even if you go to someone's home and that you give them a nice painting about the pastimes of Krishna. This is mercy. After all, you are engaging their fruits of activity in Krishna's service. This is karma yoga. So you are merciful. All the devotees who go out into this world and engage others in Krishna's service are oceans of mercy. Those who are engaged in producing these books, they are oceans of mercy. Those who are even helping others to do those services, they are also oceans of mercy. Because we are all acting out, basically, of our own mercy. Nobody's forcing anybody to stay here. We can't force you to stay. There are no shackles on your legs. There are no electrified fences with watchtowers and machine guns. Anytime somebody wants to go, he can just disappear out the back door. Nobody can force anybody. But we stay here because the devotees see, here is the opportunity to associate with other devotees engaged in Krishna's service, and that's very nice. And We are, as a movement, pushing forward the mercy principle, bringing mercy to the fallen conditioned souls. Therefore, we want to just somehow keep going and bringing to the living entities as much as we can about Krishna. Surada sarva dehinam. Therefore, the best friends of the living entities. We act as the best friends of the animals too, because we are training up people not to kill them. That is also part of our philosophy. We are not only working for the sake of the human beings so that they can go back to Godhead, but we are working for the sake of the animals, so human beings shall not kill them unnecessarily. Thus the devotee is seen as Surada Sarvadehinam. He works for the best interests of all the living entities in the whole universe. After all, when you're chanting Hare Krishna, the sound vibration is not limited to just this planet. It is stated that the transcendental potency of the holy name pierces the coverings and layers of this material universe and goes straight to the Vaikuntha Loka. Therefore, the transcendental potency of the holy name is a transcendental mercy expanding throughout the whole universe. This whole Krishna consciousness movement is based on this mercy principle. How to give transcendental mercy to all of the living entities. But we, as devotees, must be very tolerant to do that, because sometimes the living entities will not like what we are doing. They will not like the idea that they're being given mercy. They will think, this is not mercy. We don't care. We don't need mercy. We're fine. Even though they may be suffering like anything. They'd rather suffer like anything than surrender to Krishna. They don't care if they're suffering. But they don't want to surrender to Krishna. But still, despite their unwillingness to surrender, we give them Krishna anyway. That is the mercy principle. But to do that, you have to be tolerant. Just like sometimes the people in the madhouse may say crazy things to the doctor, but the doctor has to tolerate that. Being a doctor in a madhouse means you are insulted very often. Very often. Not only verbally insulted, but physically assaulted too. You may be talking to somebody who's very peaceful, and all of a sudden they pick up a chair and bash it over your head. This is one of the occupational hazards in a madhouse. So, you have to expect that. You can't think that here I am in a madhouse, everything will be fine. All the madmen will be very appreciative that I am coming here to make them sane. It's not that they're appreciative. Some of them are appreciative, there's no doubt. And those persons there's some hope for. And some of them, they're not appreciative at all. In fact, they feel very disturbed. Yeah. The one who thinks he's Napoleon gets very disturbed when this doctor comes into his palace one day. How dare you come in here? Out! Off with his head! But this is what all the madmen in the material world, we find some of them are thankful and appreciative, and some of them are very disturbed. They don't like that we as transcendental doctors enter into their private little palaces and castles of the material energy. Everybody wants to section himself off in a portion of the material world and make himself the lord of his castle and enjoy in that way. But the devotee tolerates this and somehow or another tries to deliver that person Krishna consciousness too, according to the needs of that person. So, when the mind is filled with some good quality, then it becomes a very, very useful instrument for realizing the Supreme and helping others too. I mean, the mind has no good qualities. It becomes the cause of distraction or destruction of our spiritual life. When the mind is actually completely freed from the entangling conditions, then it will also be freed from the interactive mode. The mind has an interactive mode. It is always reacting, is always acting in relationship with the sense objects. It's always relating with the material world continuously. The interpreter is always on. It's always acting in a way in which you always become entangled in this material world. And the mind doesn't let that go. Doesn't let go its grip on the material objects, so long as there is material desire. And thus one is bound, slowed down. But when the living entity is freed from material contamination, the mind's grip on the sense objects is released. It is no longer in this interactive mode of continuously being absorbed in reciprocating relationships with these sense objects. It becomes free. At that time, when it develops freedom, it does not just stay like some bird doing circles in the air. It has to land. Achapurusha avyavadanam ekam anvikshite. The mind experiences a oneness with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Prabhupada even goes so far as to say here that when the mind is completely purified in love of Godhead, the mind becomes the mind of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The mind at that time does not act separately, nor does it act without inspiration to fulfill the desires of the Lord. In other words, the mind becomes so much absorbed in Krishna, it's so fully Krishna conscious. It is, as Krishna calls it in Bhagavad Gita, madbhavam, my nature. Full Krishna consciousness means madbhavam. Putam madbhavam agataha. When one is purified, he attains Krishna's consciousness. Therefore, this movement is called Krishna Sambhavana Samstha. This is the Krishna consciousness movement, whereby we are developing Krishna's consciousness. That is the oneness. Of course, that does not mean that we lose our individuality, because that relationship is developed in love. And that loving, reciprocating relationship requires two: the individual soul and the Supreme Soul, the object of love. But when the mind is so much absorbed in Krishna that there's nothing but Krishna there, well, that's pure Krishna consciousness. And there's a oneness there. And Prabhupada says, the mind becomes the mind of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So much purified you cannot see the difference anymore. The gopis are in this condition. They could not see the difference anymore. Sometimes they would even imitate Krishna. They would just run around as if they were Krishna. That is a big difference between that and the Mayavadis who do the same thing, or the Sahajas who do the same thing. They run around thinking they're Krishna. Yes, they think, I'm God. The gopis don't even think about God. They only think about Krishna. They become so much absorbed in Krishna. They start to become insane. if Krishna will go away from them. When Krishna left the rasa dance, he had them so inspired by his association, then he just went away. And they became insane. They could no longer control themselves in any way. They were talking to trees, talking to plants, imitating Krishna's pastimes, like total madwomen, because their mind was only absorbed in Krishna. So, this is a high platform. But this is what the verse is speaking about. We are giving Bhagavatam class on a verse. Yes, there are very high platforms mentioned in Srimad Bhagavatam. We sometimes become a little afraid to mention or talk about these things because, after all, our minds, being a few feet away from the nearest receptacle of nasty substances, are not exactly qualified to discuss the highly confidential relationships or characteristics of the most highly elevated devotees of the Lord. But after all, someday we'll get there. Someday. We have that hope. Hope against hope, is it not? If you don't have that hope, well, get that hope. You should have that hope. We have that hope someday that we too will roll on the floor in ecstasy chanting Krishna's holy name. We don't expect that day to come soon. But we have hope, isn't it? Have you the hope? Do you ever think about this? One must think about, sometimes thinking about when, oh when that day will come. Kabe hobe. What is it? Kabe hobe. Say din amar. Kabe hobe bolo say din amar. This is Bhaktivinoda Thakur. When, oh when will that, maybe Narottam Das. Anyway, when, oh when will that day be mine? When, chanting in ecstasy, tears of love will roll down my eyes in torrents of rain, like torrents of rain. When, oh when, will the hairs stand on ecstasy simply by hearing the holy name of the Lord? When? Devotee is waiting. Not that he waits just because he wants his hairs to stand on end. You can also do that with some electricity, static electricity. You just put, they stand on end. But that doesn't mean anything. That's not the point. The point is not the hairs. The point is the loving ecstasy within the heart of the devotee, which causes this reaction to take place. Or being stunned in love of Godhead. Sometimes Krishna's associates, thinking about Krishna, would just become stunned and would not even be able to move in any way. And sometimes Krishna paints pictures on them when they are stunned like this. So, we find that the Supreme Lord and His devotees, very sublime relationship. But now we are on the stage of trying to get to the point of tasting that relationship. Therefore, we are on the platform of the sadhana, on the platform of the sadhaka. He who is trying to become Krishna conscious. Therefore, Krishna will relate with us in a different way. Sometimes He may drop a little mercy to give you a taste of what's coming. But now we are on the stage, bhajana kriya, engaging in service under the instruction of the spiritual master, and anartha nivritti syat, clearing away the unwanted things in the heart. This is cleansing time. Cleansing time. We're still in the morning bath. In the long day of becoming Krishna conscious, we're still taking our morning bath before the Mangalarti. This is a cleansing time. Cleansing. Yeah? Sometimes some foolish devotees try to fall into this Ashtasatvika bhava or lila. The eightfold pastimes, the day is divided into 8 particular portions where Krishna and his associates, led by Srimati Radharani, are performing different services to him in different ways. And sometimes devotees think that by simply absorbing themselves in this, that they're actually entering within it. But this is just like licking the bottle of honey from the outside and imagining that one is within the bottle of honey. Yeah. This is imagination. So long as one has got material contaminations, this platform is not possible for him. He's still got contaminations. He cannot enter into Krishna's pastimes. They are locked. You can read about them, you can hear about them, but entering within them is not for those who've got contamination. They're locked up. Just like the bottle of honey may be closed at the top. Yeah. And you can look at the honey, examine it from different ways, talk about it with others, speculate on it with others, lick the bottle, smell something through the closed jar. But the real flavor and taste of the direct experience of the honey is not available so long as the jar is closed. Similarly, Krishna's pastimes in their actual form, in the loving reciprocation, is not available unless one actually is qualified in pure love of Godhead. How to become qualified? Take up this process very carefully. 4 regulative principles. No eating of meat, fish, or eggs. No onions or garlic. Nothing purchased outside. Everything should be prepared by devotees and offered in a proper fashion. And no gambling. Yeah. Includes also speculation. The speculation, like real estate speculation, which has become a very big occupational duty in certain parts of the world. Yeah. Spend your hard-earned money, buy a this, sell a that, buy a that, sell a this. Speculation. Stock exchange. Yeah. Securities. Then we have no illicit sex life. Amplifier didn't like that. I got a kick out of that. No illicit sex life. Only for producing Krishna conscious children within marriage with one's own wife. You have to say these things nowadays. It's the Kali Yuga. Muhammad said, don't have sex with your mother. Obviously, you don't do that. He still had to say it, so we still have to say it. And no intoxication. Yeah. No coffee, tea, or cigarettes, what to speak of heavier things, which are obviously intoxicants. So therefore, these rules must be followed. And above all, that's of course, these rules, these are not any big deal. This is just to get you to the human platform. This is just human life. So it is not that if you follow the 4 principles that you've become a great devotee. At least you've become a human. First we make you a human being. Then we give you initiation. We only initiate human beings. We don't initiate animals. And chanting of the 16 rounds every day of the Hare Krishna mantra. You know why we say Hare Krishna mantra, don't you? We mean the Hare Krishna mantra. The mantra with the names of Hare, Krishna, and Rama. Not Shnei, not Kitty Kitty, not the Brum Bum Bum Bum, Padadam Nam Nam Dum 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 Digi 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 Dum Dum Dum. No abbreviated Hare Krishna mantras, condensed version, summary studies. Hare Krishna, Krishna Ram, Ram, Hare. Hare Krishna, Ram, 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 Ram. Hare Krishna, Ram, 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 Ram. We hear these mantras all the time. Amazing mantras some people come up with. We're talking about the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Every day, 16 rounds, without fail. And following the programs of Krishna consciousness, hearing Bhagavatam, speaking Bhagavatam, greeting the deities every day, they are the lords of our activity. The lords of the Swedish yatra. Ashishi Gandharvika Giridhari. They are the lords. We're their servants. Therefore, we come to see them. It is not that they come to see us. Every day we come to see them. And we thank them very much that they are here. It is only by their mercy, that's for sure. What they had to go through in the beginning when they first came here. I never wanted to install the deities because I knew what they would go through. And they did. But they are merciful. They also arranged for their own service very nicely. So, now it is nice. I think. Well, it's up to Krishna. We can ask him. So, they are the lords. And everything we have is offered to them. This understanding must be there. That we are simply maintaining their place. We are going out and preaching on their behalf. And thus, we are very, very able to do anything because of their mercy. And Krishna is so merciful upon us that even though our eyes are contaminated with material existence, we can still see Him because He has come just to give us His mercy. And even though we are contaminated, we can still see Him with that eye. And then gradually those eyes become freed from all contamination. So that is mercy. Krishna is helping us in so many ways. Krishna is within us. A super soul teaching us, giving us inspiration, how to serve Him better if we want. Or if we want to be rascals, He may also help us in that way too. But we should want to be Krishna conscious. After all, anything else is pure foolishness. And we know it too. We've learned it life after life. How many lives do you have to live in such a useless, wretched condition before we remember that this is not a place for gentlemen? This material world is not a place where you want to make a permanent settlement. It is a place of various forms of suffering. Therefore, Krishna so mercifully gives us the opportunity to surrender to Him, and we should do so. With all of our hearts, all of our minds, our words, our activities, surrender to Krishna. This is the best opportunity. This is the most wonderful time, because we have been so lucky as to take birth in a time when the opportunity to surrender is easily given and available by the mercy of Srila Prabhupada. He has established these Krishna conscious centers throughout the world. He has established the deity worship throughout the world. It is on his authority that the deity comes. And he has given us all this knowledge by which we can also surrender to Krishna. Therefore, by such extraordinary mercy of Krishna's pure representative, by his austerity of bringing to us Krishna consciousness, we are able to surrender. Therefore, how lucky we are. If we had taken birth here 30 years ago, if we were living here, let's say, we took birth 60 years ago, what chance we would have had at that time to be Krishna conscious? And it's very hard to surrender to Krishna when you're older. Those who surrender when they're older, they are very good people. It's very hard to do it. When one gets older, he gets locked into his particular characteristics. We've even heard that in psychology, it's considered by the time you're 35, you're locked into your life. And you can't bend anymore. Whatever you are, you are. That's it. And imagine when you're 50, 60, 70, woo, your circuits are burned in real good. And how difficult it is to change lifestyle. Very difficult. Therefore, those who do it are very respectable. Yeah. And not many. Not many. Not many at all. Mostly people are younger. But that's good, because when you're young, you still have some idealism. You haven't found out yet what the world's all about. Therefore, there's still some idealism, and one can surrender very easily. Good. Take the opportunity. Don't wait till one gets older. Yeah. Because then it becomes very difficult. The older one gets, the harder it gets. The younger one is, the easier it is to adjust his life to a life of Krishna consciousness. And when one does that, he doesn't lament or regret that. Because he takes the opportunity to surrender to the Lord, to surrender to the spiritual master, Krishna's representative, who is trying to bring Krishna consciousness to everybody. Some take, some don't like it all. But some who are intelligent, they surrender and actually say, I want to be engaged in Krishna's service. I want to chant this Hare Krishna mantra. I want to go back to Godhead. Please take me. And spiritual master says, that's all right. Now you follow these rules, principles, accept and learn this Krishna conscious philosophy very nicely. Follow this program, engage in the service of Krishna. Yes, you'll go back to Godhead. It is not difficult. One must simply want. By that sincere desire, one can conquer over all of the difficult situations that Maya is throwing at us continuously and go back home, back to Godhead. So, we should try to surrender. We should try hard. It may take a little struggle, but do it anyway. After all, if everything was easy, it wouldn't be very valuable. Without hard struggle, what question is there of glorious victory? And this struggle in Krishna consciousness to go back to Godhead is only one lifetime, maybe. What's that? One lifetime out of billions. Maybe two. Maybe. Why two? One! Surrender now. Go back home, back to Godhead now. Don't wait. You never know what will happen. One can be grabbed away by Maya at any moment. One should be fleeing from Maya as one flees from a burning building. One should never just say, oh, all right, building's burning, but anyway, I'll just stay here as long as I can in the burning building. No! Time to get out of this material nature, this hellish fire of this material energy, which is just scorching the conditioned souls with the heat of the suffering condition. Suffering in the body, in the mind, suffering from other living entities, suffering from the weather. Just suffering conditions all the time. And then, how to conquer it? Chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So, we will stop here. You can start to set up this fire yajna. I will come down and chant Brahma Samhita. 10 minutes. Hare Krishna. Can give the names. Subal. And we'll call the boys up one at a time. And then the girls. One must pay dandabat. And then I will ask you the rules and how many rounds, and then give the name. And then afterwards, the Brahmin initiates can all come to my room with sheets. Brahmin sheets, Gayatri sheets. You have supply? No. So, sheets. Well, you better. Yeah, get some photocopies for everybody. So, Dr. Pekka, tell me. And what are the 4 regulative principles you will follow for the rest of your life? And how many rounds every day? Okay. Your name is Pratika Das. Is that all right and finish? I heard I got in trouble last time. Back to Ole. What are the 4 regular principles you will follow for the rest of your life? No meat, fish, or egg, what? Okay. And how many rounds every day? Okay, your name is Uru Shravadas. Back to Petchi. What are the 4 regulative principles you will follow for the rest of your life? And how many rounds every day? Very good. Only 16? Okay. Your name is Pururavadas. Back to Peter. What are the 4 regulative principles you'll follow for the rest of your life? And how many rounds every day? Okay. Your name is Pratika Da... No, wait a minute. I gave the wrong name to Pekka. That's all right. You hadn't even remembered it anyway. There's so many on this list. Like I can. Your name is Paramparadas. Huh? No, Pekka. It's Paramparadas. So everybody else is okay. And your name is Pratika Das. Miko. Hare Krishna. Bhakti Miko. What are the 4 regulative principles you'll follow for the rest of your life? And how many rounds every day? Okay. Your name is Mandata Das. Dr. Christine? What are these 4 regulative principles you'll follow for the rest of your life? And how many rounds every day? Okay, your name is Chaivana Das. Danish Bhakta Over. What are the 4 regulative principles you follow for the rest of your life? And how many rounds every day? Okay. Your name is Utkala Das. Swedish Bhakti Uva. What are the 4 regulative principles you will follow for the rest of your life? And how many rounds every day? Okay, your name is Ogavan Das. Dr. Morgan. What are the 4 regulative principles you will follow? For the rest of your life. And how many rounds every day? Okay, your name is Midvan Das. Back to Alan. What are the 4 regulative principles you'll follow for the rest of your life? And how many rounds every day? Okay, your name is Aryavarta Das. Now the girls. They need a way to come up here. Or maybe it would just be easier if you 4 boys right here. Chaivana Das and Utkala Das. All of you here, if you all just get up and stand here for just some minutes. Bhakti Nanette. What are the 4 regulative principles you follow for the rest of your life? And how many rounds every day? Okay, your name is Anuttara Devidasi. Bhakti Narya from the BBT. What are the 4 regulative principles you'll follow for the rest of your life? And how many rounds every day? Okay, your name is Mahalasa Devi Dasi. Almost all the boys' names, they come from the family of Manus, or descendants of Lord Brahma, great kings. And all the girls' names are names for Srimati Radharani. Bhakti and Christina. What are the 4 regulative principles you follow for the rest of your life? And how many rounds every day? Okay, your name is Chandra Balaba Devi Dasi. Bhakti and Christine. What are the 4 regulative principles you follow for the rest of your life? And how many rounds every day? Okay, your name is Aparajita Devi Dasi. Bhakti Eva. What are the 4 regulative principles you follow for the rest of your life? And how many rounds every day? Okay, your name is Ekanga Devi Dasi. Bhakti Tina. How many rounds every day? All right. Your name is Trilokya Mata Devi Dasi. Oh. Bhakti Sos. How do you say this? Oh, with the thing in the middle? Sos. What are the 4 rules you'll follow for the rest of your life? And how many rounds every day? All right. Your name is Madana Mohini Devi Dasi. Who will come and take the beads for Bhakti and Olga? Swayambhu? From Leningrad? Oh, Kiev, sorry. Kiev, oh. So taking the beads for Bhakti and Olga. Ataparupa Devi Dasi. Swayambhuva is a humble servant. No. Bhakti and Sos. Better late than never. What are the 4 regulative principles you'll follow for the rest of your life? And how many rounds every day? Alright, your name is Savitri Devi Dasi. Bhakti Marie. What are the 4 regulative principles you'll follow for the rest of your life? And how many rounds every day? Okay, your name is Mukhya Prada Devi Dasi. So I'll just read all the names again. Pratika Das, Bhakta Peter. Mandhata Das, Midvan Das, Ogavan Das, Urushrava Das, Pururava Das, Parampara Das, Pekka. Utkala Das, Chaivana Das, Aryavarta Das, Savichi Devi Dasi, Ataparupa Devi Dasi, Aparajita Devi Dasi, Ekanga Devi Dasi, Anuttara Devi Dasi, Trilokya Mata Devi Dasi, Mahalasa Devi Dasi, Madana Mohani Devi Dasi, Chandra Balava Devi Dasi, Mukya Prada Devi Dasi. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare,